Hi, this is Wilfredo Hernandez on behalf of Brooklyn Community Pride Center's LGBTQ New Americans Oral History Project. And I'm here today with co-interviewers
Jarrett, Lyons.
And Rebeca, Centeno.
And we're here with...
So I'm Lyosha and I'm here at Brooklyn Community Pride Center. Today is June 17th, 2018, just for the record.
Thanks, Lyosha. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Why don't we start out? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about where you're from and where you grew up.
So that's a very hard question to ask because primarily I don't answer, but I can say that I was born in Soviet Union. And I was born in a very small town in the north of Soviet Union. It's not Moscow, it's not St. Petersburg, because all people assume that all Russians come from Moscow or St. Petersburg. It's Urals, it's a very tough region, and I was born in 1985 in the family of the intelligentsia, historian teacher, and we were accidentally brought to that part of the world because my great-grandparents were Germans and they were repressed during the Stalin's regime, and we ended up in the middle of nowhere and the town called Solikamsk, because Sol, it's salt. It was a city produced salt during the medieval ages, but now it's surrounded by prisons. So it's the end of the world, and that's why a lot of prisons are located there, because it's surrounded by woods, winter time, very unbearable conditions. And I wasn't pleased at all being there. It was a small community, very narrow-minded community, not open-minded. And of course, in 90s and 80s, especially when I was born, nobody knew anything about sexuality or identity. So it's industrial city. It's about 90,000 people population right now. But the city itself is the town, I should say, not the city, is dying because of a lot of economical crisis. But all people stick to the city, all people still live there, and my whole family and relatives still living there. And I could tell only that growing up there was not the easiest thing to do, because first of all, I was born during the Perestroika. Perestroika is like liberalization of the whole Soviet life, and I consider myself lucky because all generations before didn't have a chance to express themselves. And I was educated in a particular way. My mom is very tough person, but at the same time she allowed me to do whatever I wanted, even playing with dolls or kitchen cabinets or whatever. She didn't care. So she was very non-conformist. But we were outsiders and marginalized people because our cultural identity is different. I never could get why I should relate myself with Russians, because I have nothing in myself in terms of Russian mentality, and I was wondering because I didn't know my history until I turned 12. So I never knew that we were strangers, we were absolutely people from not the Russian communities. And when the first time learned about that, it was already 90s, when a lot of talks about sexuality broke down, and a lot of TV shows about sexuality and even LGBTQ issues were aired. But the city where I was born and was raised still remained very closed. So it's very... so I've been back and forth because I left city when I was 17. But in the meantime, in that period of life, I never knew any queer person. I never knew any gender non-conforming people. So I was gender non-conforming because I could stand up and say, I don't care, I will play with girls, dolls, whatever. So, and I didn't give a shit about anyone. So, but itself, it's very, no infrastructure at all. So there is no entertainment except probably street games, with your backyard buddies. Because thanks God we didn't have anything like social media apps at that time. We didn't have any cell phones, even home phone I didn't have at that time. So it was very poor, let's say. We weren't rich. My mom, in 90s when the crisis began and the Soviet Union collapsed, of course, all of these intellectual professions were out of the market, and teachers and some professionals or educators were paid very, very small amount of money. So we barely survived. And one part of my life I should mention, because I was born in very interesting family and with very interesting relatives. I had relationship with my cousin, the closest person to my life. He was my man. He was my boyfriend, let's say, because I was 9 months younger and he took care of me, and his father was military guy. So being queer inside, and I was raised within the military basis, because we will go to different activities and I will go with on a hunting, fishing. I never did myself, but I was watching all of these brutal men gathering together, no women allowed at all, and you know, all how they cursing, it was so homoerotic experience. I will only one I could recount in terms of homoerotic or homosexuality, whatever. I don't know if they were, some of them, gays or not, but my cousin, with whom we've been almost living together for 17 years, we had some kind of very interesting relationship, affectionate relationship. Even though he is straight, he has family, he's the head of the prison right now, and he's a colonel. So can you imagine how many challenges we had at that time? So, and I didn't have any questions. What it was, we imitated sex when I was 4, he was 5, and we had different encounters and patterns or whatever, and nobody will question that it's something prohibited or pervert or whatever. So yeah, but we couldn't show it, of course, because the environment of the city was very toxic. You still will be picked on for being different, and I was picked on when I was in kindergarten, on at school, but my character and my temper and my personality helped me out, because every single time somebody will pick me on, I never paid attention. I did something weird, they never would approach me again. So that was my self-defense line. And then I, of course, was introduced to, and my mom got a position as a deputy principal at the school with very difficult teenagers who ran away from homes, who had broken families in terms of alcoholism. When I was 5, 6 years old, she would carry me during the winter time when she was conducting home visits to her children, and I would see people in poverty, in blood, literally in blood. So I've seen life, and it taught me tolerance, because my mom was a very tolerant person. She never judged anyone, and that's why being among prisoners, among some kind of outlaws, among children with certain level of suicidal ideation, or with families who could not afford even being in some kind of apartment, because all of those buildings we went were abandoned buildings. So I've seen life, and it has created my perception of life, even though I was relatively born in privileged family, white family. In Russia we didn't have, of course, colors of the ethnicities, because we all were united, brothers and sisters and comrades during the Soviet time, and it helped as well. So I just was observing that even though I come from the family who could bring bread on the table, there are some people around who cannot afford it. And it has created in my mind perception that whatever I do, whatever I pursue, I still can relate myself to those marginalized people, because probably I was marginalized inside. And it was easier for me to get along with not with the school teachers or whatever, but with people from maintenance staff. Like, when I was a kid in kindergarten, sometimes my mom worked until the midnight, and somebody should pick me up from the kindergarten, and she put in charge my aunts, who sometimes forgot to pick me, and I was until 10 p.m. talking to those people, like guards, and I was so comfortable with them rather than with people from some kind of, very full families, because my family wasn't full. I was born without any father, and it's like Soviet, if you have heard, maybe in the United States the same, it's very common during the Soviet time when women were single and they didn't have any husbands, and all of a sudden they fall in love with someone who was already married and had a family. This was my case. So I was born when my father had a family and had a daughter, but I didn't know anything about that. So my family was considered not full, and it's a stigma in Russia. So if you come from the family without father, something wrong with that, something wrong with you. And it resonated in my older life, of course, not on myself, but on perception of myself from the outside people. And when I was 5 years old, my mom got married with my stepfather. Not a good example of life, not a good example of human being who is absolutely abusive and alcoholic, abusive towards me, not towards her. She never gave anyone to humiliate her because he was weak. He's like, a piece of crap. So, but he was drinking, and he was heavily drinking. And that's another problem of the town. There is no job, and when people cannot occupy themselves, they turn to alcoholism. They turn to some kind of misbehavior. And he had a job, but he comes from the family with this pattern of alcoholism. So I have seen a lot. And he committed suicide in front of my eyes. So I've seen a lot. That's why the depressiveness of that town still in my mind. And especially in 90s, only one intention I had to get out of there, because I cannot find anything. I cannot find anyone who, and of course growing up in this toxic atmosphere, you always will dream American dream, or all of these bullshit love movies when you just, one day the prince and the white horse, or at least on the white some broken car, will come and take you away. So this was my internal intention, by any chance, to get out of the, but I know that I will do it. I knew, because I wanted to enter the university, which is not in this town, another town, but it was hard, especially when puberty came. So I guess everybody who had and who has LGBTQ experience growing up within the very conservative values of the society, and especially in 90s you don't have internet. So, and all of a sudden you started paying attention to males' bodies on the beach, and it hits you because you don't know what is wrong with you. And we went to the resort area when I was 14 years old, and we went to the Sochi resort, which now is very well known because of these Olympic Games in 2014. But we went there, and all of a sudden I started paying attention to male bodies, and I didn't know what was going on with me. I was very distressed, and I never had sexual tensions. I had spiritual tensions towards men, because probably some will say all of these idiotic psychotherapists who like very fake will say, it's because of lack of father figure. It's a bullshit psychology, because if I never had it, why I should have it? So if you never tried ice cream and you don't know what is it, you don't want to do it. So the same with my father figure. But I started just, it's something interesting. I got this, I got that cute guy, and what I should do, because if I go back to my environment, to my school environment, to my society, they wouldn't understand that. And I was suffering. Probably it was mild depression, I don't know. Back to Russia, we never have any diagnosis connected, because the whole Russia is depression. So if American psychotherapists go there, they will be depressed themselves and committed suicide. Because for Russian people, it's not the option to go on therapy. You have to survive. So that's why I was very quiet. I was struggling with my identity inside. And thanks God, at that time we got cable TV. And cable TV helped me to come out to myself, because I watched some very interesting movies still in my favorite top list, like Trick. Maybe you know Trick, 1999. It's New York City, when two guys met together in some club and they want to make out, but they couldn't find an apartment. So it's a very interesting movie, which helped me, and I was, some people out there like myself. And after that, Oscar Wilde with Jude Law and Stephen Fry and some. And all of a sudden I said, I don't know anyone close to me, but some people there they probably gays as well. So why should I bother myself with my sexuality? And I came out to myself. After that, I came out to my friend, to my cousin, and to the whole class on the prom, because I was, screw you. And I got up and said, I'm gay. That's it. That was my farewell to the school and to this town when I moved in 2002. So it's a lot of stories, a lot of not pleasant memories about how I was treated because I always was very emotional, gesturing, waving, and not like masculine pattern of that society. And they will call me, I guess in the United States you call it sissy boy, pantsy boy, or in Russian baba. Baba is a very derogatory term to describe woman. So in the village sense, Baba is a very strong woman who carries the whole household on her shoulders, because you know how Russia is. It's not patriarchal culture. It's politically patriarchal, but socially it's matriarchal, because all women carry those alcoholics and children and all of these farms on their shoulders. And that's why Baba, in that sense, is a good term, but in sense of referring to you, so it's a derogatory term to describe that you are not like us. And since kindergarten, I will hear it a lot. Somebody will just spit on me. No, it's too much. And bullying at the school. But, you know, I survived somehow. And it didn't break me. And every single time people will love to humiliate you, and they are not giving back the same reaction they expected to. So they, you know how bullies are. So they pick on you and expect that you're gonna be crying, you're gonna be something else. I never did that. And it took them by surprise. And they always withdrew themselves because they didn't know how to react further. So, but not everyone like me. And I know that a lot of people there were, and some of them still in the closet, being in their 30s and their 40s, and only one person I remember wandering around the town who was called gay or faggot. Was a very old guy, probably traumatized and probably beaten up too much and violently abused, and everybody would know him as he's that Zhenya. His name was Eugene Zhenya, and everybody will refer to him, this pervert Zhenya somewhere. So stay away from here. And I had encounters with him on the streets, and it was very unpleasant because even young children will call him names, and he was definitely mentally ill. So it's only one person I knew who supposedly was queer, was gay. And after that, years after that, I learned his story, so that he was probably died of the colorectal cancer, something like that. I don't know what it's called here. So yeah, it was pretty tough environment. And imagine myself being in Suna with military people, like 30 men, and they got knocked down and made some inappropriate jokes in a very tough language, because my uncle, who was like my father, he loved me, and despite the toughness of the job he had, he was pretty soft in his heart. But he will bring us over to all of those masculine environments, you know, and just okay. And of course, during the puberty, how to escape erection, being in Suna with 30 military people. So it was very, very interesting experience. But finally, I was released. I released myself, moving out of the town in 2002. But it's, yeah, you know, people, even Russian people, don't know and don't have a sense who come from big cities, who born in big cities, and sometimes people take it for granted. And I believe the same with New York City. People who were born in New York cannot relate to people who were born in Iowa or Ohio, in very small villages and very conservative communities. So this is this helped me as well, because people from small places, hinterlands, in my mind, remain more open-minded regardless their conservative environment, and more eager to learn something, and more generous towards other people who are on the same page and the same situation. So this was as our Russian classic Leo Tolstoy said, my universities, my school of life. And I don't want to go back there. I have no nostalgia. I'm not suffering from nostalgia, but sometimes it hits me that something is missing in my heart and my brain, especially being exiled in the United States.
I have a question. Can you tell us about the movie Trick?
Yeah. So, because I didn't speak any English, and it was apparently translated. And The Trick is a movie was made in 1999 by straight people and straight actors. So the essence of the movie, one guy, he's a Broadway musician, whatever, off Broadway, who writes some plays, writes some lyrics, and he's eager to meet someone, to have relationship. He is not confident gay, he barely goes to bars, and one day he goes to the bar and he sees the stripper who is performing it's Dreamweaver, it's a very famous song, and he just spotted him and cannot approach because he's very shy. He goes out and eventually meets that guy sleeping on the subway. And that story begins. He gets off the train and that guy spots him and goes after them, and they aggravated, they wanna make out. It's like a passion between them. They go to this place, to his apartment, which he shares with his roommate. It's one room apartment he shares with his roommate, and his roommate brings over his girlfriend and wants to have sex with her, and they have to decide who is staying in the apartment. That guy loses and they on the street. You know, it's a one night story when they circulate around the city trying to find a place to make out. But during those hours spent together, something grows between them. And they eventually goes to bar. Maybe you know this drag queen, Coco Peru. She appeared in that movie, and it's a great monologue about big penis and pride festivity, whatever. So it's an amazing movie. I strongly recommend. But eventually, of course, as all Hollywood happy endings, they already don't want to make out, and because they fall in love, and he writes the phone number on his palm and call me, and the movie is ending. Happy ending, everybody's happy, but a lot of music there, a lot of fun there, and I can relate because I think to a certain extent, except romantic involvement, it's in New York. It's totally New York scene, and people can make out right on the street without going somewhere. So, but it's very sweet. It's very sweet, and it was very significant to me to watch that movie in that time in 2001, I believe. But movie was released in 1999. So, and actually that movie, when I came to New York in 2014. The first movie I watched was that. I already forgotten about that movie, and all of a sudden it pops up somewhere, and I go, oh gosh, now being there, still struggling with my identity 2001, and being here throughout the years, and you already in New York, you know, it's a magnificent sense of happiness and some kind of excitement. So I still rewatch sometimes. I know that's from the queer perspective and gay, let's say, not queer, gay perspective in New York, it's a little bit silly. It doesn't happen too much. People don't fall in love immediately, and they just want to have sex. That's it. So boys want to have fun. That's it. But the movie is interesting. I strongly recommend you to watch that.
Thank you.
So you mentioned before that some of the gay people in media, and I guess these films and kind of played an influence on your being able to accept your identity. Where did you find that strength to claim the identity? You know, where did you find that strength within yourself, and what was that like?
It's a very good question, because as I mentioned, since I was born and since I was 1-2 years old, I was always very determined to claim whatever I wanted, and my struggle with my relatives and my kindergarten buddies was very significant in developing my own perception of life. So I never accept the word when somebody says, no, you cannot do it. If I want to do, I want. I was fighting my kindergarten teachers, I was fighting my school teachers if I thought they were doing something not right. And I guess it's from my mother and from my grandmother. So because my grandmother was 10-year-old when she was repressed and stripped of her identity as German, and she never, until her death, never expressed, and we didn't know. I knew only from my aunt and my mother, but my grandma never will mention that. And my mom, who was very strong character, and can you imagine two strong personalities meet each other? And my mom cannot do anything with myself, so she could exercise her teaching skills on her nephews and nieces. But when I was born, she gave up because she cannot oppose me because I was much stronger. And I don't know where it comes from, but it's from the whole identity experience of my family in the past. And every single time somebody will pick on me, I just, okay, do it. But I feel that way. I wanna do it, I'm gonna do it. What you can do? You can beat me? Okay, you can do, but physical pain will go, but I'm still, every single physical experience I had in terms of abuse gave me much more strength. And after that, probably I come from educated family, and I never had heard anything from my mom judgmental towards any people. Probably this was a kind of key element to my identity. And I was reading a lot, I was watching a lot of TV, reality shows in 90s, which were very open-minded and liberal at that time. And I was analyzing, and I was putting together some puzzles, and probably this helped as well. But it's a mystery for me still, because I know myself, and throughout my years being openly queer, absolutely, or openly loving dolls or whatever, even my relatives who will gather during my birthday will say, I want a doll. What you can do with that? And maybe it's my personality, sometimes very straightforward, and people don't know how to deal with that because they don't have skills. If you say something openly to their face, and they don't know how to react. The same was with my teachers. The same was with my classmates. So I guess it's still mystery for me. But we call it non-conformity. We call it charismatic leadership, and I guess it helped me a lot. And that's why, because I already had some experience being humiliated before I discovered my true identity in terms of queer, it helped me to accept myself. So because I clearly remember that I didn't mention to anyone, I struggled, I suffered, but eventually when I came out and said in my mind that I was gay, it was a relief. And after that, I didn't owe any explanation to anyone. When I told to myself, and it was most important part. Maybe it's a part of selfishness, positive selfishness, when you're trying to live your life not by the rules, because I never lived by the rules, and I was always kicked out from the classroom if I said something critical, or because you have to understand Russian or Soviet Russian tradition of education. So there is only one authority in the classroom, it's a teacher. You are not allowed to criticize or to discuss or have a discussion or have a dialogue. It's only a monologue of teachers. So when I heard they said something stupid, I wouldn't be silent. I would say that you're wrong. And that was my experience with arguing, and probably it helped a lot. I don't know. I have to go back to the years back and see what was the major and key point. I don't know. But I was, as long as I remember myself, I've been always like that. Even being very little. Oh, I have the perfect example. When I was 8-year-old, I was hospitalized, and they should perform surgery because I had hernia. And doctors come into my room with 10 people and tell me, okay, we're having surgery on Thursday. Be prepared. I hated that hospital. I wanted to go out as soon as I can. 30 comes, they come in and say, unfortunately we cannot perform the surgery because Thursday is the surgery room is not open usually because it's something sanitarian day, whatever. And I started arguing with them. You promised me that you will perform surgery on this day. And they got so surprised, 8-year-old who arguing his way, and they opened up the surgery room. They called out anesthesiologist, and they were so, and when it went well, and when my mom came and my aunt, they told her, oh gosh, you got such a kid. Because nobody would argue. Everybody would, okay. But I was 15 minutes in a row trying in a very adult way tell them and show them that they weren't right because they lied to me. I didn't cry, but I was very aggravated. So this is a good example how I made the way through some difficulties and obstacles.
That's a great story. So you came out, and you came out to yourself and to your classmates and to your family, or is it mistaken?
To my cousin.
To your cousin. What happened next?
So when I came out to my classmates in June 2002, I already knew that I'm gonna move out from town and I'm gonna enter the university. So it was the kind of examination period of time. And I didn't tell my mom at that point. And I totally knew I had nothing to lose. I had been with those people 11 years in a row in the same class. If they cannot accept them, screw them. And surprisingly enough, they didn't tell anything. But of course, a lot of them after that, they started spreading some rumors about myself. They separated themselves from me. I didn't cry, of course. I didn't care. Okay, it's your choice. And I moved to, happily enough, I passed through the exams. I entered the university. I moved to the bigger city, which is Perm. It's 1 million population. And I thought if I will be in Perm, I could finally find LGBTIQ community because it's a bigger city, it's much more opportunities. And the first 6 months of me being a college student were very interesting because I met some gay people eventually. First time I went to the gay disco bar, which is not like here. You go to Hell's Kitchen, you see all of these bars and all of these fluorescent lights. In that time it was a college dining room during the daytime. On the weekday, it was turned to the gay club, secret gay club, underground gay club. And I met my first bad word. I don't know who is the boyfriend, I don't know. First someone who introduced me to this scene. And when I met that guy, I decided, okay, that's the time I should tell my mom. And I went to Soli comes back to the Christmas, New Year's holidays, and we had a 2-hour conversation with her. And that was the significant and the last stop of accepting myself and my identity. Because my mom didn't scream, didn't curse, didn't express any disappointment. She was just asking, maybe I did something wrong. It's very pattern question, whatever. And after that, I decided, okay, we had some months of adjusting the new environment for ourselves, and she was a little bit detached, but she, being a strong person, I guess was deciding between society and her son. And she was smart enough to choose her son because she never cared as myself about the society. And that was a most important coming out in my life because she was very supportive. She bought me some gay magazines, even though we don't talk about that. And this is my issue. I think that our parents not our best friends. So parents are parents. You don't owe them anything. So you owe them life, but it was nature. They wanted you. You didn't want them to give birth to you. So why you obliged to them the whole life? So I love my mom, I respect my mom, but she and myself understand that we cannot live lives each other. So we have to have our own lives. And that's why I never will discuss with her any intimate details. Of course, if somebody significant comes into my life, I'm gonna tell her. But otherwise, why should I? I don't hide anything. She knows about my everything. So that's why it helped me a lot. And of course, being in term, all of a sudden I realized, okay, I was determined to be introduced to LGBT community. But I started going to those bars and understood it's not my cup of tea. It's so shallow. It's so ridiculous. People get drunk quickly, buying cheap vodka because they cannot afford anything else, and all of their conversations circulating around sex and clothes, sex and clothes. Like, hate it. Not absolutely interested in that. And after 4 or 5 times, I was so bored to death. Until I met some people who were old gay people who lived through Soviet Union, and they experienced punishment because it was penal code, and Article 121 prohibited gay male sex by imprisonment until 2 to 5 years. So, and I started just distancing myself from the gay scene. And surprisingly enough, I have had more straight friends than gay friends, because gay friends in Russia always betray you from the community. From the, we call it tusovka. Tusovka, it means the people who always party, who always go to the parties. But years went by and realized that that community is only 5% of people who go constantly to the disco bars. Other 95 either hidden or doing their own job. They never go into the parties. And it led me up to study myself, because when I was 2-year college student, I decided, okay, I didn't know anything about LGBTQ history. I didn't know anything about myself. I knew that I'm pretty good in history because my mom is historian, but there is nothing about queer people. History wasn't written at that time. And like, how come we can exist if we don't know our own roots? And from those roots, we have our own internalized homophobia, because we were taught you are some kind of product of Western degeneracy. You're a product of Western market. You're a product of this new culture of hippies and whatever. And I wasn't comforted by that. I decided, okay, and I started studying. I started reading books about homosexuality in historical and political perspective. I started doing some assignments for my classes, and I started fighting my own professors who were completely homophobic and conservative. And that was my, let's say, legacy to this world, because I was the first open gay student in political science department. And I decided, okay, let's do something about that. And I started writing curricula, some essays, and publishing articles, challenging that conservative world. And I got a lot of negative feedback. One day I almost got kicked out of the university just because of my professor's homophobia. Not because I was very good in classes. I didn't want to do shit. Because some people, maybe the same in the American colleges, but we have seminars, okay, when we can get grades. And people from my class, they always were telling some bullshit just to get plus. And I was quiet. I didn't want to be a part of this cacophony, of this concert with stupid remarks. I prefer to keep silence until somebody challenged me from the professors. And they were regretted about that. And it magnified me, because the whole class was absolutely, a couple of them were absolutely tolerant, a couple of them were homophobic. And when I wrote some articles, they would gossip about that. They would curse me down, because, oh, faggots in a prison, So it was a challenge which I accepted. And it was very funny and very interesting years of my life during the college, surviving the first severe physical attacks on me for being gay in 2004, when I was severely beaten up by a couple of idiots from the local bars close to my dorm. We went with my friends, we were drinking, la la la, and all of a sudden it was a very Superman style of the event in that time, because we were sitting together, we were already tipsy, and some guys approached our straight friend and they circled him around, and I was like, how come 6 people on one guy? And me, being gay, started defending this piece of crap who couldn't tell anything, and I just like, hello, you know. It was very funny, but eventually I got very severely beaten up. They called me names and they were beaten up by my face, and half of my face was paralyzed for 6 months. And we opened up investigation, because in Russia, when you go to the emergency room, or we call it travpunkt, pain point, whatever, they have to report to the police. And police called me out, and the officer told me straightforward, I knew who did it to you, but I'm not going to open up an investigation because you have to blame on yourself. A lot of perverts in my district. So he was referring that you're gay, it's your fault, I don't care. And he forced me to sign withdrawal from the investigation, and in a couple months I got a letter from the Attorney General, and it was stated that we couldn't find any evidence to open up investigation. And that was my first encounter with the institutions. And I realized nobody could help you except yourself. Authorities not on your side. And this was a lesson to my life. I never would address any issues anymore to the authorities, because it's useless. That's how I encounter institutionalized homophobia in Russia, and how I encounter violence from the police. So it was pretty tough years, let's say, but every single year gave me more strength, and I gained much more power to present myself, to express myself, not being afraid. Even you have to contradict your own classmates, professor, or your own friends. So that was beginning of my life journey to the queer studies, to the queer activism, being absolutely marginalized and ostracized sometimes by some people who supposedly should be much better than ordinary people because they're professor, they're in the liberal environment. But it was my misrepresentation of that environment, unfortunately.
What was it like completing your studies then? From that point forward, you led this charge within the university, and you, legitimately, genuinely created your own path, and fought for it. So how did that conclude? What did that build to? What did that build up to for you?
You know, it never was easy, because in that time we never had any mentioning of LGBTQ studies, except the small gender course which was given by a friend, not friend of mine, by my future colleague who was teaching gender studies. And sometimes slightly she would say something about LGBTQ in a very neutral sense. And luckily enough, when I was a third year college student, there was a class called multiculturalism, American approach, and it was an assignment to compare sexual minorities, which I hate the word, but it was in that time the best way to describe. And I got very excited. I wrote that essay. I got you call it A+, we call it 5+. We don't have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We have digitals in our scores. So, and I decided, okay, it's so interesting, and I can do that, and probably something could come up from that. And of course, there was big backlash from some my classmates and my professors. And when I had heard something like that, it gave me much more energy to do so. When somebody says you cannot do it, I will do it, just as an opposition to you. And years went by, I started doing a lot of appearances, and I wrote some essays for some projects, like federal projects, and eventually I concluded it with my diploma in 2007, which was called Sexual Minorities in Russia as a Political Issue. And I was comparing different backgrounds, American backgrounds, European backgrounds to Russian backgrounds, how Russian LGBT movement had arisen during the 90s. And surprisingly enough, by that time I was already like top student. I came out from my shadow the first 2 years of university. To be honest, when I was meeting that guy, dating that guy, I dropped almost university, I was 17-year-old. So, but I got my grades and I got to the top, and surprisingly enough, they gave me the highest score and they recommended me to enter a PhD program and to publish a part of my diploma. So, and that was my gate to the science, to the professional community. And when it was a commission, 5 people in the row, one of them was invited. She's from Moscow. She's Moscow State University of Foreign Affairs, which is top university of Russia. She was a chair of the commission who were listening to our diplomas, and she told me, wow, I never would think that somebody will do something like that, because in Moscow it was clear words. In Moscow you never can do that. Moscow, especially Moscow State, all of those universities very conservative. So, and that we did it in Perm State University, which was very liberal at that time. She was amazed. It gave me much more strength, and I decided, here we are. I'm going to do work research on LGBTQ, and I was like flying up, and all of a sudden when I had to choose my topic for PhD thesis, I was so excited. Let's do LGBT studies, and I was told, no, you could not. So you could keep the focus, but because our committee of PhD is very conservative and some of those people are religious, I was told, let's reshape the study. And I ended up doing studies on minorities, including women as a political minority, ethnic minorities, and LGBTQ. Not entirely LGBT, I had to play around, but it was a very difficult journey and difficult path to take, because I was, verbally abused by my coworkers and colleagues, not to my face, but behind my back. They would tell some students of those that, oh, there is a faggot in the political science department. But I already started teaching classes. So, and it was 2 years of, hell. Like Dante's Divine Comedy, the same. I was going through a lot of challenges, and at some point I was thinking that I couldn't make through, because it was so many bureaucratic barriers preventing me from doing that. But eventually I did. In 2009 I got my PhD, and that was a critical point for me. Now I have PhD, now I can turn around the world. I can do everything what I can. It was my thought, and I started being invited to different conferences and giving classes on, because I had created queer studies in political science and social humanitarian sciences in general, because nobody did it before. And I created some kind of lecture for non-professional students or non-professional people, for some kind of teachers, educators. And I was doing much of that, and I was publishing at that time different articles until a certain point. So it helped me to build up my confidence that you're doing not just blah 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 work, as many researchers do. Just who needs talking about, some kind of skies if those skies are not practical. So this was my point. I want to do it practical. I don't want to study it for the sake of the studying. I want to do and bring something to the community. And I started partnering with some LGBTQ groups in Perm. and we launched the first support group in Perm Rainbow World. So I tried to project my research, my studies on the real community, which was very suppressed by that time already, because homophobia was resurrected in Russia. And that's why I gained much more confidence, and everybody knew that I was queer professor, crazy queer professor. And what does it mean to be among those mostly male dominant professor with their own perception of history, for example, which doesn't exist even in women. So that's very, very sexist and misogynist, not to mention homophobic faculty. And even though they never, this is worst part, they never will express directly. They will be doing it like in very intellectual way, intellectual humiliation, which is worse than somebody will say, yo, that and this. So yeah, it was kind of challenging, but I guess it helped me a lot. And I believe that my example has helped a lot of my students who were suffering, who were even, not out, being even younger than myself. And can you imagine, because by that time I was working already, not only because Russian professors don't do much in terms of money, and we have to work in several places. So the critical point for me to enter accept my university when I had full-time agricultural academy. So by default, agriculture academy, it's an academy with people who got stuck in their 50s and because they were teaching how to cultivate potato. And those poor students never heard of anything like gender studies, queer studies, even subculture studies. And here we are. Can you imagine myself, 50 men in the room, auto mechanics, they car repair engineers, and myself. So, and the first 2 minutes, they will be petrified, some freak on the stage. After that, the conversation will go and go and go and go, and after the whole semester will approach you and say, we watch Prayers for Bobby, straight people. So, and that was the best compliment you could get as a professor, as an influencer. So this was my path to educate and to enlighten people and to give them some spot to argue, to discuss, because we were, that was taken away from us when we were growing up. And a lot of students would text me via social media, expressing their own fears and their own anxiety and depressive mood being others. So that combined my title, I guess, not only being professor, but some kind of psychotherapist for them who didn't have place to go and to address their own issues. So this was my, I guess, the greatest achievement being still in Russia.
And at what point after that did you decide to leave Russia?
I didn't decide pretty much to leave Russia because in 2013, June 2013, the law called Propaganda of Non-Traditional Values was passed. But before law was passed, I already knew that Federal Security Services were watching after me, and I had some encounters with students whose parents were colonels and Federal Security Services years before. They will approach you and say, oh, we know you're gay. You go there and there, you meet there and there, you meet those and those people. So it was pretty understandable that government has not given space, even being under Constitution, to people who are priori could be a threat to the national security, to ideology. And when the law was passed in June 2013, it institutionalized heterosexism and all this violent regime towards LGBTQ people. The Putin had found a new scapegoat. And I was already appointed as the deputy dean for student affairs and in October 2013. And in the beginning of November 2013, I got a call from our director of security services of the university, who is, with the sweetest voice, told me, there's a new guy. He was appointed to protect the university from the outside influence. He wanted to meet with you. So I went to his office, if we could call it office. It was absolutely no signs, the plain door as they used to do in Soviets. So, and I go in, we sit on the couches, and he told me, let's be friends. Let's be friends. You know, a lot of things going on in the world. I totally knew that he was appointed by Federal Security Services, but you have to know that Federal Security Services is the successor of KGB, the secret police during the Soviet times. And during the Soviet times, it was the #1 department at each university which controlled ideological environment in the university. So they resurrected the same institution within the universities. And he knew who I was. Totally. And he said, you know, a lot of threats to our homeland going on. And you're now holding the position which is very important. If you knew somebody who was gay and who was communist, nationalist, homosexualist, please report on them. So he was trying to recruit me to be his, I don't know what, agent of death, and I was playing fool. I don't know what you're talking about. I cannot intervene private life of every single person in my department. It's not my job. And every single week he will appear when I go. And all of a sudden my apartment was under watch. Some right-wing activists started gathering close by to my apartment when I was working very hard and until the midnight. And when I will go to home, somebody would go after me. I got a lot of calls, I got a lot of buzzers, I got a lot of threats via social media, and it was already a very intense atmosphere. And I had to move from my rented apartment to apartment of my friend in the secured building, and I couldn't share the address with anyone because it was very dangerous. And of course, a lot of calls like, you're a faggot, you have to be killed, something like a lot. And for the last 6 months I remained in Russia. I will be driven by my friend's driver, who will drive me to my work, to some public events in terms of security. And the critical point, the real critical point, because I already had open tourist visa. I've been in the United States before in 2013 as a tourist. And in March 2014, there was an article came out, pointed out that myself and my colleague promoting sodomy in the Penn State University. And they were people who wrote that, ultra-right activists, they were demanded me being fired. And that article laid on the table of our rector, our head of the university. And that was coming from that guy, security services guy. And I realized that was something I could not take anymore, because the next point, of course, they could fire me. And if they fired me, I never will be able to find something like that in the whole educational system, because it's a kind of stigma on your face. And without no telling anyone, because I could not. If I told someone, they wouldn't let me out of the country. And I had to keep quiet until my vacation started in July. So I was still doing my job, but every single day was like you walking by the razor, because you cannot predict what's going to happen. Probably will round you up, they will put you in jail, they will kill you, because I had already those physical encounters with right-wing activists and my chin is cut. So a lot of things like that happened to me. But I wasn't afraid of physical pain. Physical pain will be gone eventually. But if your spirit is broken, it never will be recovered fully. So, and I waited, and I still did public appearances, radio shows, they invited me, I did some public lectures on queer. And when my vacation started, the next day I took off with one suitcase, with no sense of direction what I had to do. So I heard something that you could apply for asylum, but I had no sense what I should do. So I just took off, I went and arrived to New York on July 31st, 2014, with no people here, with no much language, with no understanding what I have to do, because you leaving behind the whole life, the whole career, everything. But I wasn't afraid, because it was more excited rather than disappointed. And I came and I just started doing my stuff, and for 1 month it was toughest month in my life, because it was complete silence. When the person who used to do a lot of public appearances and lectures, all of a sudden you cannot talk to anyone because you have no anyone here. And I will just wander around the city trying to cope with the new environment, and it took me quite a while. But I could not just sit and like that crying girl, oh my life. No, I never will do it. I forced myself to do ESL classes, to improve language. I forced myself to find some communities, and that's why I found Russian-speaking LGBT support group, which I will take over in a couple of months, and after that, Rus LGBT eventually, which I run right now. So it was, experience, and I call ourselves, because we were the first wave of immigration after the new era of genocide of queer people in Russia, and I call it philosophical steamship, like during the 1920s when Lenin kicked out the whole intelligentsia from Russia, all professors, all researchers, all writers who opposed the Bolsheviks regime. So I felt that way. So we are in exile, in the lifetime exile, because we have no choice, and we had no choice coming here. But I appreciate, because probably it was my destiny to end up in the United States. When I was 4-year-old boy, will come to my mom and say, I'm gonna live in the city with the lady with torch. So what was happening in my brain when I was 4-year-old boy, I don't know. But it's kind of, my place, and I love New York, at least to a certain degree. And of course, people, it's again, my personality helped me to survive all the struggling here, but a lot of people cannot. A lot of people have a lot of issues, mental health issues, and issues with drugs and alcohol, because they cannot cope with immigration. Immigration is not a walking around the historical places and enjoying the weather. Immigration is the toughest choice, and sometimes it's not a choice of your life, because you have to understand that probably you won't see your relatives, your beloved ones again, because you're cut off the home country, your homeland. But thanks God we're in 21st century. Skype forever, WhatsApp, Twitter, Tinder, Grindr, Grindr, whatever it's called. So you can communicate. It's not 30 years ago Jewish people will come here without any sense of direction. But now you can, even my 65-year-old mom learn how to use Skype. So that's, some kind of achievement in our life, but it's very tough. So we're still recovering after being through the procedure of immigration, because you see the land, and the problem with Russians that you always will be taught that American people or the United States is a land of abundance, is a land of, you never will see in any propaganda movies or propaganda TV shows segregation, racism, homophobia, religious stupidity, and you never will see that. You will see only the beautiful Hollywood movie, like, I don't know, what is it, Trump, Lady Trump, all of this garbage from the Hollywood. They meet each other, and in 5 years they meet again, they get married, and live happily ever after. So it doesn't happen here, of course. And you don't know about that. And you think, oh, you come to the United States, everybody welcomes you with the open embraces and the red carpet. A lot of people think that way. I didn't think that way, because I knew about the United States. But a lot of people think that way. It's kind of crushing their dreams and ideas. And when you come to the point, you have to deal with immigration services, with some kind of institutions in New York, and you just surprised that it's so bureaucratic. It's even much more bureaucratic than Russian bureaucracy. That's ridiculous. And it's still not overcome a lot of issues. So that's why people cannot, and some of them didn't go through and they went back, unfortunately. So this is so sad for us. It's not a huge population, a huge percentage, but some people left because they could not find themselves here. And being in New York, being in one of the most wealthiest city and expensive city in the world, being immigrant and being mistreated by your own LGBT, not your own, but your LGBTQ peers, it's very frustrating. And that's why probably it gives me a lot of strength to fight against American capitalism in terms of LGBTIQ advocacy. So that's why, do not get me wrong, but I'm not a big fan of LGBT Center in Manhattan. I'm not a big fan of a lot of organizations like HRC, because it's a very capitalistic vacuum cleaner who just sucks all the money and doesn't help people as well. And that's, I realize that queer immigrants are not much welcomed here if not only you are going through that and trying to show the people that we're here, we're queer, we are like you, but we are just from this fucking Russia, or all of the 12 republics of the Soviet Union. So that's what I hate about LGBTIQ scene, hypocrisy, and taking advantage of your stories, as well as media. They take your story, they suck up your story, they suck all of your juice and put out there, oh, poor immigrants, see caravans on Mexican borders, ay. Next day they move forward and they completely forget about those people on the border. So that's why it's my mission right now to fight for our own presence. Because in 2014, when I came here, even asylum office and immigration services didn't know what was happening in Russia. They thought that Russia was a democratic state with the full package of human rights and constitution and all of this. So just because of our stories, they started realizing, oh, probably it's not so like we thought. So this is very captivating, interesting period of my life. And don't get me wrong, but I'm getting older already. So, and that's, for young people, it's much easier to accept and to adjust New York City. Being 17, 18 years old, language comes to you easily. And you haven't had much life there, like status or career or job. And here it's a perfect space to start over. For us, for me, it's not a problem. I was distributing postcards of the book I needed to survive to pay my bills. And everybody will go, oh, how could you do it? You're a professor and what? So I didn't care. It was fun. I learned about the geography of New York City. It wasn't, of course, pleasant job, but at least I helped myself to survive. But a lot of people cannot do that. Cannot do that because they think it's a little bit humiliating for them. So we're in struggle, in the constant pain, constant struggle, and in the kind of crossroad, what to do with our lives next, and will we make it through? Because of current political climate is not so especially good for immigrants.
Yeah, what would you say about that? Can you speak about, the current political climate with regard to immigrants?
Mm-hmm. I can say only a couple of things. The first of all, Trump is Trump. He's idiot. Let's be honest. He's just bullshit artist. And 2 years ago when he got elected, people were at the end of the world. End of the world, mamma mia, we have to move to Canada. Go there and you're gonna die there because nobody wants you there. The first step. The second step, you never lived in Russia. For us, like being frustrated with Trump, but you know that Trump probably in 4 years, he will go away. And let's be honest, it's not Trump who has started this anti-immigration policy. Obama had deported millions of people, but because of some political correctness, nobody will mention that he was very fruitful. I love Obama, but at the same time, he did the most damage to immigrants. Detention camps for immigrants existed in his lifetime, especially for transgender people. Come on, So, and people were it's American way to, we're dying, it's the end of, it's like, I don't know, apocalypse has come eventually. Everybody was talking about that and it comes. That's not true, because Trump is Trump, but you still got your constitution, you still got your laws. And the main point is, so if you lived in a very pink world thinking that the United States has made it progress, it wasn't true. Because the United States covered all of these problems, racism, segregation, Native Americans, the poor people still haven't gotten anything they deserved, and everything like that. And they just, let's put it in the words and everything's beautiful, welcome to our country. Trump is a critical point for the people to wake up, to open up their eyes and to start fighting for their rights, because you still have freedom of expression and freedom of speech. And if you are not doing that, you cannot achieve anything. So for queer community, for example, for queer immigrants, it means, of course, it's a lot of danger right now, because after he announced certain limitations and Muslim ban, we have a lot of people from Muslim countries. And you know that story about Chechnya, genocide of queer people in Chechnya, and they cannot come. Only one country hasn't taken them, it was the United States, because they are Muslim people. And it affected us. The first ever person, queer person, detained in Florida for flying back from Virgin Islands to Florida was a Russian guy, our guy, who already had abandoned asylum. But because he went to Virgin, even it's United States territory, the ICE questioned him and they put him in detention. He was HIV and he wasn't given with HIV medication for 90 days. He was remaining there. And it was the first precedent, but they got him out. It was a very nice campaign by immigration equality, some people. So in Russia, forget about it. You never will do that. So what American people have to realize, a lot of Americans were born with privilege, especially if they're white population, if they're not ethnic minorities or religious minorities. They were given with everything, and now they have to realize they were taken, something was taken away from them. The world they lived in revealed itself. And you either take this opportunity and finally will be fighting along with other people who were marginalized along the way, or you will be losing, because see what's going on right now. So queer immigration is still relatively okay, but we don't know. The transgender woman died in detention a couple of weeks ago because of ICE. And what American people say, and you see in New York a lot of videos like that, oh, you speak Hispanic language, you have to go back to your countries. So, you know, this what empowers people. And it reminds me a little bit Russia, because I keep saying that Russia and the United States not so different at all, after all, because the propaganda machine, the media, whatever. So I believe that it's kind of the second wave of 60s, of civil rights movement, of queer movement, or some kind of subculture movement, and we have to reshape the some kind of, I don't know, basic needs or basic values of this country, or reclaim the basic values of this country. And I'm glad to see how many people got together and protest along the side, and it's very fascinating. And we don't have to be afraid of that, because it's a natural political process. It cannot be always smooth line. It has to be turmoil, which eventually will get us to the point, maybe to the better point, because the United States never been a country with the progressive flows towards human rights. It's hard to say. Only 2015 they passed, or 2015 passed the same-sex marriage bill, which was already adopted in many countries since 80s, in European, even Fiji. So that's kind of, we have to look. But for immigrants in general, it's because now they're taking away children. They withdrawing DACA. They withdrawn TBD status for Haitian people who suffer from earthquake. Tomorrow it could be us, because General Attorney Sessions already quoted Bible talking about taking children away. So what's wrong with the nation? I cannot understand. But the best point of that over 50% of the population is not on the Trump side. And that's some kind of optimistic challenge. And the elections motivated people to go and vote. A lot of states already overtaken by Democrats, because it's a kind of, and it always will be like that. Americans always, it's binary system. Democrats, Republicans, Democrats, Republicans, Republicans, Democrats. So there is nothing to be surprised about. So it's predictable. So that's what we should do. And here in New York, there's a huge coalition, New York Sanctuary, City of Refuge, so which is fighting for immigrant rights. And thanks God, our local government is not collaborating with ICE. So, but we always know that some people out there who can report on you. So that's why what we can do right now, and just to speak out, to join different coalitions and to show to the world that immigrants are essence to this country. All and every single time I hear, oh, you have to go back to your country. Who are you? Your ancestors colonized this country, killed thousands of indigenous people, overtaken the lands, and you're saying they should kick you out of this country. So that is my point of view on this. But we need to see. We have to call out Congress people. We have to go after elected officials. We have to press them and show that doing this nasty job towards immigrants is beyond any human rights vision. So that's why I'm not saying that it's worse or not worse. It's just political turmoil. We have to overlive. We have to go and do something, not sitting and watching Kardashians. We have to finally already do something which is profitable. And that's why, as I pointed before, the Americans look at everything in either way, super bad or super cool. So this is an American dream and nothing in between. And that's why when people face something not fitting their point of view, for example, everything should be glamorous, everything should be beautiful, as I don't know, what is that movie with this Julia Andrews song, whatever, musical is, everything is this glamorous way, la la la, let's sing and everything will happen. No, of course, because when people face the real challenge, they don't know how to react. And now is the real challenge. And now people should go, and I'm glad that a lot of Americans joined immigration coalition and stand up for our rights. Because I know that what could be done next, now that they already talking about to eliminate green card lottery, to get rid of this spouse green card application, and we know that next it could be asylum, which is essential for our people who come in from those countries. And American embassy already has issued limitations to issue visas for Russians, for example. So now they have to wait over 160 days to have an interview for tourist visa. So we know how it works. And unfortunately, I will say that we will experience some kind of backlash and probably reduced of immigrants coming to this country, because it's not safe at all. And we've got some people who went through detention centers being transgender Chechen people, and it's not the best way to describe how America treats immigrants on the borders, or being different or being others. So it's ridiculous. But we either take over the moment or we lose it. So that's only one way to describe how we should proceed. But do not forget, I come from very dictatorial regime, and for me, Trump is not a huge threat. The threat are people who have been in that way long before Trump came to the power. They just could not say. Now they empowered all these Ku Klux Klans, white supremacists, and anti-immigrant movements. But fight for that. because it's a good time to start your uprising.
Can you talk a bit about your own activism efforts and your leadership here in New York City?
So when I started doing work for RUSA LGBT, Russian-speaking American LGBT Association, it was already a time when a lot of newcomers and asylum seekers started coming to the United States. And our basic goal is to give those people space, to socialize them, to provide with basic needs as information, how to get legal services, how to get medical insurance. And after a couple of years being in that position, I realized when I came here that a lot of people coming to the United States, they don't have language, they afraid of everything, and most likely they will be settled down in Russian-speaking areas. But Russian-speaking areas in New York, and when we say Russian-speaking areas, the first what comes up, Brighton Beach, because Brighton Beach is the heart of the Soviet Jewry immigration, and now Russian-speaking immigration. People come here, and because of lack of documentation, papers, they have to settle down there because they could find easily apartment, they could find a job. But what they face there, the same mistreatment, because Brighton Beach has frozen in time. It's a time machine. If you go there, it reminds me of my 80s in the Soviet time. The same babushkas on the benches cursing everybody out and call everybody prostitute and slut and drug addicts because they have no other perception. They never been out of Brighton Beach, and they kept the same prejudices towards others, including LGBTQ people. And instead of embracing your identities, our people have to keep quiet and have to go back to closets, even being in the United States. And when I started here, and I experienced some encounters with old people who will call you faggots in Russian way, and in different other stories, and people will encounter how they were mistreated by landlords, by the employers, and a lot of medical facilities in Brighton Beach, who will call them names. It gives me headache. I get outraged, because how come coming here you allowing yourself to be treated in this way you had in your own countries? And it led me up to the idea we have to do something. Because Brighton Beach is not the Russian autonomous republics. It's not some kind, it's a ghetto. Let's say it's ghetto. We have to reshape it. We have to do something, because that what the point coming here. We need to discover new horizons and to teach those people. If they cannot accept, fuck them. I don't care. I have no respect if you're Holocaust survivor, but if you treating us as Nazis treated you, I don't respect you. Because you should better know what it means to be persecuted, to be lost in the time, and sometimes even to be physically and morally suppressed. So that's why we were talking about how we should proceed. And I came up with the idea we need to launch the first Pride, Brighton Beach Pride. Because otherwise, if you sit down and keep quiet when somebody asks you a question, are you married? Because they notice your ring. Oh, we're single, isn't it? And you answer, yes, but my wife, blah, blah, blah. Instead of saying husband, for example, like it happened, they still, in that sense of fear and hatred, they cannot even produce words, the right words. Keep quiet, not being outspoken, outstanding, whatever. Be like them. No, it doesn't work. And it took me 3 years to persuade my own community. If we don't do anything, this homophobia will be ongoing in years to come, because the old generation produced already the young generation, and young generation who remains in Brighton Beach sometimes inherits the same attitudes because they're not out of Brighton Beach. And first, when we declared, let's do Brighton Beach, everybody, oh, you're crazy. No, let them die. It's a beautiful formula they have for those people. Let them die. And when they are dead, we can take it over. But it will take, you will be first who dead. They will survive or overlive everyone. So that's why we need to fight with that. And we started planning, and eventually we launched last year on May 20th, 2017, the first Brighton Beach Pride, with a lot of backlash from our own community. People who have that internalized sense of homophobia, and we were arguing with them, and they say why we should go there with all of these feathers and boas and whatever. You will provoke them. But we will go to the New York City Pride. What the sense of that? So you're going to New York City Pride, but you're not going to Brighton Beach Pride. Maybe you don't have to go to any Pride at all. What that means for you. So, but it went well, and except some interesting, encounters with old people, because old people didn't understand what was going on. They were marching with us, dancing, and eventually when they figured out it was a gay pride, they were, oh, so many gay, I don't accept it. But you were dancing alone. So we having the momentum right now, because at the same time, I'm fighting with my own community to show them that you have to do something before somebody does it for you, because nobody will do it for you. You have to advocate for yourself. Otherwise, you will lose the battle. Because the same happens with the New York City Pride or other benefits we got as a queer community. Somebody fought for you, and now you eliminate the work of those people who were before you. So, and you just use those benefits, not thinking that those benefits were taken by force, by struggle, by the long fight. So that's why there's different directions. So RUSA always been social, political, and educational network. And so fighting with our own LGBTQ community for acceptance and because a lot of them are racially biased, or, because they come from white privileged communities mostly. So we fight with some organizations who eliminate immigrants' agenda as well, who proclaim that they work with immigrants, we help immigrants, but don't help at all, like LGBT Center. I worked for LGBT Center for 2 months, and it was enough because they had a grant for immigrants, but they didn't do anything for immigrants. But they took advantage, and every single time it's a huge gate, and with the crocodile tears, we're so much into our poor queer immigrants. Bullshit, I don't believe any of your words. So this is my agenda, and the first to establish them. So we are trying to get our 501c3 form and to get some grants, because we need a resettlement fund for our people. We have come to that point that we cannot help them materially. We don't have any funds and any money. So everything we do, it's only enthusiastic efforts. And sometimes we collect money through fundraising for the certain cause, but we don't have the balanced budget to help people with housing, to help people with some food, with some metro cars, because some of them come in here without any money. So we do different work, and of course we react on any political crashes experiencing in our home countries, because we're still related to those countries. So for example, now on 19 we are holding a World Cup protest, because World Cup is taking place in Russia, and FIFA, which is very hypocritical organization, hasn't taken any steps to judge Russia to issue any statements on LGBTQ rights. So we do political protests as well. We fight, and I go personally to elected officials, to some kind of institutions across the city to help our people, to establish some relationship. And 3 years ago, nobody will care about me. Now they listen to, because what this freak will say the next, because I'm very outspoken and critical, and they're afraid. And we just want to establish some relationship, and now people won't be processing their own fears inside, and they could go, for example, to Human Rights Commission and report homophobia or transphobia or sexism or whatever, because our way to cope with issues is to suppress it. So we don't know that there is some organizations, some bodies we can go to and address our issues, because this is Russian way to be alone with the problem. So it's a long way to go, and I think that because of different political climates, I don't know what we're gonna be in next years and years to come. Probably when the asylum immigration will be shut down, which could happen, we have to focus entirely on our own people who are already here and how to probably turn to the certain way of service for those people. But for now, we experience a lot of immigrants coming, and every single day, every single week, we will have 1-2 people coming over. And unfortunately, we cannot help them entirely. We can do something, but without any budgeting, it's hard. And it's hard to persuade any organizations give us money, because we need, and a lot of organizations would love to donate money, would love to give money. But for example, to go to Fire Island and have this white shirts party, or to go to some more entertaining places. So this is a struggle. You always have to persuade people that you are not a tree. You are not some kind of mysterious toy or mysterious monster from nowhere. That those human beings who are here and they need your help. That's what we are trying to do. And I guess we've come a long way, and we've come to the very significant point in recognition of Russian-speaking LGBTQ queer community.
Is there anything you want people to know about LGBTQ immigrants?
What I will put out that when we hear Russian speaking, it doesn't mean we are from Russia. So we are very diverse, very broad community, because we have people from all over walks of life. It's all 12 republics, and some of them people never heard of, like Mongolia or Tajikistan or Azerbaijan or Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan. And this is very significant when you talk about Russian-speaking population, to point out it's not Russian people, because some people get offended because of the very complicated history of Soviet dominance and Soviet colonization. So that's why we are very inclusive community, and Russia LGBT does not welcome people who are anti-Semite, racist, misogyn, sexist, and what's so all of those ists. And that's very important for us, because we can say that we are not, because people think about us like white community, but a lot of our own people in Russia will be considered non-white, especially people from Asian countries. So that's why we are trying to emphasize on that we are struggling, and we know what it means to be inclusive and to be diverse. And that's what we have to reflect on the American society, that American society is non-white society. It's a society of different billions of groups, which people should know better, and Starbucks employees, for example, should know better, all of this. So every single day we have to remind ourselves that despite our appearance, we're still in the long struggle, because that's what people cannot understand. And of course, sometimes I will tell our own people, you got lucky, be born white and come into this country, not from Mexico or Nicaragua or Guatemala, not being smuggled through because of fear of gang bands and whatever. So you have to take it as a privilege and turn this privilege into the positive way, not being jerks like a lot of people. So that's why, as one of my co-president told during the recognition by T.S. James, we need to help refugees, because refugees are essential to this country, because this country is based on refugees and immigrants, and this is our core value. So fight for refugees, because from that point you depend on that. So this is my only words. I have a lot of words to Americans to say, but I'm trying to be more diplomatic rather than, radical, because I'm not radical, but in some points I am.
In closing, is there anything you want to say about you? You want people to know about you?
It's very hard to talk about myself. I know, I'm trying to say I'm a regular person, even I know that I'm not. That I'm a little bit crazy and cuckoo, and for a lot of people, what I love to hear about myself, then my, I don't know how they are, not compatriots, co-queers from different republics, they call me mother of Russian queer immigration. And they approach me in very childish way, asking for advice every single day, even for some small advice. And I'm very comfortable with being mother and give my, love and care to those people who cannot take care of themselves. So that's the best compliment I ever heard and ever had, to be called mother. And it's already well spread, So I don't know, I'm just myself, and critically thinking, it's very important for me, because if tomorrow I lost my critical thinking, I will be dead. I always keep saying I'm gonna retire to the farm and raise chicken, but probably I will price chicken as well in the farm. I don't know, you always will find something to fight for. But for now, I'm in a good shape, but I guess in a couple of years, probably I have to take care of myself. This is problematic for me. I cannot take care of myself. And I miss it. And sometimes it gives me, because people look at you and they, what you have to complain about? You always full of energy, full of positive mood, and that's not true, because people see surface and people never look back and look behind. So that's why I can say that I'm pretty tough, but at the same time I could be vulnerable. But this is my problem, coming from the Soviet childhood and education. Never ever show weaknesses to any people. That's why I don't cry in public, except very special occasion. I never will show any weakness. I always will be, because you have to be an example for your population. And the same with the students. If students feel your weakness, they're gonna use it against you. That's why you have to be tough and give them those strengths and empower them. So, but the question is, who will empower me? Who would address my issues? I don't know. But it's interesting. Maybe it's American way. I don't know. Maybe I hate Supermans. I hate all of these superheroes Americans are determined to be. So because for me it's like a very heterosexist matrix to be a superhero. Do we have any superhero, gay superheroes, queer? Yeah, but in the public eye, right? Interesting. I know. I know those. What is Spider-Man, Batman? Who else?
I mean, not in the mainstream, but
it's not the mainstream, but
canon.
It has.
Some of the X-Men are gay.
Oh, I never into some superhero movies. That's what I guess differs
Not
me.
in the movies. None of the movies.
Not in comics.
Yeah.
In the comic books. I heard something about. I want to see that. Maybe we're gonna be superhero one day. When maybe our story is gonna be inside some kind of comic production. Because I know that all of these Supermen were created by Jewish queer immigrants who were closeted. Apparently, who will create these sexy heroes? Only gays. So that's why we need more superheroes. And my personal opinion that every single queer immigrant or any immigrant, they are superheroes, because they come here, they overcome and start over. And every single time when we had some encounters with Americans, for example, American partners, and they will say, your English is not perfect. you know what I will say? You don't speak Russian, and Americans don't learn any other languages except English because you were born with this language and you think it's international. Screw you, because you are not better than ourselves. So that's very interesting what I observed throughout the years. That's why, guys, let's move out from New York, because New York is very gay, selfish city. I want to do something, you know, to discover and to explore. You all, you come from New York, okay? No? Okay, that's good for you.
Texas.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm Mexican.
Interesting.
Fredo's from New Jersey.
New York
New York.
Oh,
born,
sorry, New York.
grew up New Jersey, now on to Philadelphia.
Brooklyn.
Brooklynite.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, interesting. But you all have ethnic backgrounds, right? Different ethnic backgrounds.
Mhm.
That's good.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you're not plain Americans. Good for you. Ah,
Lyosha, thank you so much.
thank you very much.
Just before we end this, is there any information you'd like to share with the public about the organizations you work with, how they could get involved or find more information?
So Rus LGBT, we have Facebook page. You can always find us there. We have our website, ruslgbt.com. We have our meetup group. We have our Twitter, Instagram, and we meet every Wednesday from 6:30 to 8:30 at LGBT synagogue called CBST, Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, which is in Midtown Manhattan. So you always can find us. And actually, we are not only the group for Russian-speaking people. So we welcome everyone because we've got so many allies and friends and partners from different country backgrounds. So we are open to new people. And we don't have formal membership. Everybody can be. And we don't charge for anything. We are anti-commercial organization. So please come and join us probably next year in the Brighton Beach Pride.
Lyosha, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm ready whenever.
So I'm ready.
Okay. Maybe you could like hold it up, and then afterwards I'll get a close up.
Okay.
Yeah. Whatever.
I don't know. I guess my sweet mom sent me last December before Christmas the old photos she had, and I was going through and found some very, very interesting. So I don't know if you can see, but there is most of me being maybe about 1 year with my mom, and some significant people in this album as well. So I can show you. This is my cousin I mentioned, with whom we had some kind of romantic relationship, who was always on my side. So, and for me it's very dear pictures because I remember him like that. So I refuse to remember him as a military guy right now and probably forgotten about our past, but this is him, and he always was a protector for me. And these poses, he always holds me very tight because of some kind of our strange relationship. And here we are in different family gatherings, and I have also some pictures of my, I believe, grandmother. So it's only one, I guess, I have. My grandmother with her husband, my grandfather, I never knew, but she was very tough. She was, what did you call it? Rock stone, whatever it's called here. So yeah, basically she collected and she arranged some pictures from different years of my life at school. As you see, I always was alone with girls, and they were my friends. Very not queer person. So this is my prom at 9th grade with my classmates. Not that significant, I mentioned when I came out. But here we can find some from this is very significant period of time for me, because this was the time when I realized I am attracted to guys. So it was resort in Sochi. That period when I was already starting struggle with my identity. So that she just got some, I don't know, bizarre pictures of me and sent me over. I don't know how she arranged them, what was her thought, but it melts my heart sometimes because it's something what is missing already in my life. This is my prom, the 11th grade, when I came out to my classmates. Being very thin, tall, and so much official. Yeah, I guess this is very interesting. There is my college years already. Not so much of that, which sometimes I miss, sometimes not, because I never wanted to go back to any point of my life. I want to live in the present time and, be attached to that. So this is already my nieces, nephews, yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank you so much.
thank you.